I woke up in the hospital room with a pounding headache and stitches near my temple, still groggy from brain surgery. The nurse said my wife hadn't called once since the operation. Not a single message, not even a, "How are you?" 3 days later, my sister came to visit and sat at the edge of my bed, her face pale. "Daniel, I didn't want to tell you this, but Teresa's been moving furniture out of your house." I thought she was joking. She wasn't. My wife of 18 years had packed half the house while I was unconscious in a hospital bed. By the time I got home, there was a handwritten note on the kitchen counter. No explanations, just 5 words. "I can't be your caretaker." But here's what she didn't know, what no one knew. I had already seen this coming months ago, and I was ready. Now, let me ask you, what would you do if the person you trusted most abandoned you during the worst moment of your life? Have you ever been left when you needed someone the most? If you've ever felt betrayed by a partner, by a family member, by someone who once promised to love you through sickness and health, this story is for you. Stay with me, because what happened next changed everything. And when she came crawling back 3 months later, she had no idea what I'd prepared. Let me show you. My name is Daniel Ramirez. I'm 45 years old, a high school history teacher in Phoenix, Arizona. For the past 2 decades, I've lived a quiet life. I love the classroom, love helping my students see patterns in the past, and understand how those patterns shape the world around us. I believe in timelines, in cause and effect. And maybe that's why, when things started going wrong in my own life, I paid attention. The symptoms began almost a year before the hospital. I'd forget simple things, names, dates, what I was doing mid-sentence. At first, it was subtle. Misplacing my keys, losing my train of thought during lectures. Then the dizziness started. Moments where the room tilted, where my vision blurred, where I had to sit down and pretend everything was fine. At home, Teresa noticed, but instead of concern, her response felt cold. She rolled her eyes when I asked her to repeat something. "You've always been forgetful," she'd say. Or, "Maybe it's early dementia, Daniel. You should get checked." Her tone wasn't worried. It was annoyed. We'd been married 18 years, long enough to survive dry spells and disagreements. We had 2 teenage kids together, a mortgage, routines, memories. But somewhere along the way, something had shifted. She stopped asking how my day was, stopped kissing me goodnight. She kept her phone closer, changed her passcode. When I brought it up, she laughed it off. "You're being paranoid," she said. "Maybe you should get some rest." But I didn't feel paranoid. I felt invisible, like a ghost in my own home. One night, I stood in the hallway outside our bedroom and listened to her whispering on the phone. When I opened the door, she hung up quickly, said it was her sister, but she doesn't have a sister. That was when the gut feeling kicked in. Something was wrong, not just with my body, but with us. I scheduled an MRI quietly, without telling Teresa, and while waiting for the results, I did something else. I contacted an attorney. It sounds dramatic, I know. But I needed information. I needed to protect my children and the assets I'd inherited from my parents. A house up north, a modest retirement account, a few things we kept separate. The lawyer listened carefully, asked the right questions, and advised me to begin documenting everything. Changes in behavior, financial moves, access to joint accounts. "Just in case," he said. "It's better to be prepared before it becomes a crisis." The MRI results came back the following week. A tumor, slow-growing, non-malignant, but pressing against the part of my brain responsible for memory and balance. I would need surgery, soon. When I told Teresa, she stared at me blankly. No hug, no tears, just a slow blink and a shallow sigh. "Well, I guess you better get it taken care of then." That was it. Not, "We'll get through this together." Not, "What can I do to help?" Just, "I guess you better get it taken care of." Still, I told myself she was in shock, that maybe she didn't know how to process the news, that people react differently to stress. But the next morning, she left early and didn't come home until after midnight. No explanation, no apology. 2 days later, I checked our joint account. Nearly $6,000 had been withdrawn in small increments over the past month. That's when I knew I was on my own. I went into surgery a week later, fully aware that when I woke up, I might be facing a different kind of battle, one not just for my health, but for my life, as I knew it. And I was right, because what came next wasn't just abandonment, It was betrayal. The surgery was a success. At least that's what the doctor said when I woke up groggy, sore, and disoriented in the recovery room. They'd removed the tumor without complication. With time, I'd regain full cognitive function. No memory loss, no long-term damage. I should have felt relief. I should have felt lucky. Instead, I stared at the empty chair next to my hospital bed and felt hollow. Teresa wasn't there. Not that night, not the next morning, not even a phone call. The nurses assumed we were separated. One of them asked if I had any emergency contacts besides the one who hasn't shown up. That's how they referred to my wife, the one who hasn't shown up. On the third day, Lucia came, my younger sister, strong, direct, protective. She walked in with a soft smile, a thermos of my favorite coffee, and a look that told me something was wrong. She sat down, took my hand, and said the words slowly, like she didn't want them to land all at once. "Daniel, I didn't know how to say this, but I thought you should hear it from me." I stayed quiet, just waited. "She's been moving furniture out of the house. The neighbors saw her, said there was a moving truck yesterday. She took the couch, the dining set, the paintings, even the mattress from your bedroom." I stared at her. "And your car, Daniel," she added softly. "It's not in the driveway." I blinked, swallowed hard, looked at the IV in my arm, the heart monitor beside me. 3 days ago, I was under anesthesia, trusting that the world outside would stay still while I healed, trusting that my wife, the woman who vowed in sickness and in health, would hold the line. Instead, she emptied the house. When I was discharged 4 days later, I stood on the front porch of what had once been our shared life. Half the house was gone. The bedroom was stripped bare except for my nightstand, drawers left open, cabinets empty. Even the photo frames on the walls had been taken down. And there it was, on the kitchen counter, a single sheet of lined paper, written in blue ink, 5 words. "I can't be your caretaker." That was all. No apology, no explanation, not even a goodbye. I sat on the edge of the bed frame, no mattress, reading those 5 words over and over again until they stopped meaning anything. Then I folded the note, slid it into a folder already labeled evidence, and placed it in my desk drawer. Because what Teresa didn't know was that I had started preparing for this moment months ago. I spent the next week recovering in silence. The kids were staying with Lucia, thank God. I didn't want them seeing the house like this, or seeing me like this. I kept my mind occupied, meditated, walked the backyard, took careful inventory of what she'd taken, what she'd left behind. She hadn't touched the filing cabinet where I'd kept copies of our financials, wills, and property deeds. She probably assumed she had full claim to everything. She was wrong. 3 months earlier, I'd taken steps with my attorney to separate my inheritance legally, my parents' house in Flagstaff, the trust fund they'd left for the kids, the retirement accounts, all untouchable, all secured. And most importantly, I'd updated my will. I'd written a detailed letter explaining Teresa's recent behavior, included timestamps, withdrawals, witness statements, and even screenshots of her bank activity. The lawyer had it notarized and sealed, just in case. She thought I was weak. She thought the diagnosis made me slow, confused, easy to manipulate, but all it did was sharpen my focus. So, when she walked away thinking she'd left a broken man behind, what she really left was a man who was quietly documenting her every move. And what she was about to find out was that walking away would cost her far more than she ever imagined. The weeks after surgery passed in slow motion. I moved carefully, spoke slower than usual, took naps I didn't want, followed doctor's orders like gospel. But every time I closed my eyes, I saw that empty house, that note. "I can't be your caretaker." It wasn't just cruel, it was calculated. Teresa hadn't just left. She'd timed her exit for the moment she thought I was at my weakest, thought I wouldn't notice the details. But I did. She left behind the Wi-Fi router. That was her first mistake. Because while she'd packed up the furniture, she forgot that I still had access to our shared home security system. One of those cloud-based networks, cameras at the front door, living room, garage. From my laptop, I watched the footage. There she was, 2 days after my surgery, laughing with a man I didn't recognize as they carried out our coffee table. He kissed her before loading the mattress into the truck. My heart didn't break watching that. It hardened. I downloaded every second of that footage, copied the timestamp, filed it in a folder called Timeline. The betrayal wasn't a mystery anymore. It was evidence. 2 days later, my lawyer and I met in his office. I handed him a USB drive and a manila envelope with the handwritten note, bank statements, and footage timestamps. He flipped through each item carefully. "This is thorough," he said. I nodded. "Have you decided how you want to proceed?" "Yes," I said quietly. "I want a divorce, and I want to protect what's mine. But more importantly, I want custody of my kids." He looked up, surprised. "She abandoned the family home while you were recovering from brain surgery. That's abandonment under duress. Combine that with the financial withdrawals and the footage. This won't be a typical divorce, Daniel. We'll file based on misconduct and medical neglect." "Good," I said. She made her move. It's time I made mine. A week later, I filed. The paperwork was delivered to the last known address Teresa had listed on our joint tax return. A condo in Mesa I didn't recognize. She didn't call, didn't text. But the silence didn't surprise me anymore. I started focusing on recovery, not just physically, but emotionally. I brought the kids back home, repainted the walls, replaced the furniture slowly, piece by piece. Not to restore what she took, but to reclaim the space. Neighbors brought casseroles. Former students sent get-well cards. Colleagues from school donated sick days so I could stay home longer. And through it all, I kept building my case. The hospital provided written documentation that my prognosis had been positive before Teresa left. "Full cognitive recovery expected," the note said, dated 2 days before she emptied our accounts. That was the turning point. Because if she'd left thinking I was permanently impaired, the court might have been lenient. But she left after knowing I was going to be okay. She left anyway. One afternoon, while I was organizing old files, I found something I'd forgotten. A printed email from 3 months before the surgery. Teresa had forwarded me an article titled, "Signs of Caregiver Burnout." At the time, I thought she was trying to help. Now I realized she'd been laying the groundwork, painting herself as the exhausted wife, planting the idea that she was overwhelmed, so when she finally left, she could say, "I just couldn't do it anymore." But there's a difference between being overwhelmed and being deceitful. She hadn't just left me, she took the joint savings, took the kids' college fund. She told friends I was declining fast, that I wasn't the man I used to be, but I had the records, and they told a very different story. By the time our court date was scheduled, I was walking unassisted, driving again, and teaching part-time remotely. Teresa still hadn't contacted me, but soon, she would have no choice, because what she thought was a clean escape was about to become the point of no return. The court date was set for early September, 3 months after Teresa walked out. She still hadn't reached out, not to the kids, not to me. But I knew through mutual friends that she'd been telling people I was no longer mentally stable, that I needed care she couldn't provide, that she didn't abandon me. She was forced to make an impossible decision. What she didn't know was that her narrative was already unraveling. My medical records had been submitted to the court, full cognitive recovery, documented before her departure, and that cloud footage, time-stamped and geolocated. Her loading furniture into a truck with a man she'd never introduced to the family. This wasn't a tragic love story. It was an exit strategy, and I was done being quiet. My lawyer, Brian, had been methodical. The kind of man who never raised his voice, but built his cases like puzzles, every piece exactly where it needed to be. We compiled everything, footage from the home security system, bank withdrawals and transfers, screenshots from our family calendar showing she had no medical caregiving duties, her own social media posts, vacation selfies 2 weeks after the surgery with the caption, "Starting fresh." That one, gold. Because the judge wouldn't be evaluating emotions. He'd be evaluating facts. And the facts told one story. Teresa had premeditated her departure and concealed her intentions behind the illusion of sacrifice. But this wasn't just about revenge. It was about protection. The kids, ages 16 and 13, were old enough to notice everything. Why mom stopped coming home at night. Why dad was recovering alone. Why no one answered when they called her. They asked questions. I didn't lie. I didn't poison them against her either. I just told them the truth. Your mom's figuring things out. But I'm here, and I always will be. When Lucia offered to testify about Teresa's abandonment, I hesitated at first. I didn't want to drag my sister into a legal battle, but she insisted. She didn't just leave you, Daniel. She walked out on all of us. The court proceedings began with a custody hearing. Teresa arrived late, wearing sunglasses. Her lawyer looked flustered, flipping through papers he clearly hadn't prepared. She looked at me once, briefly. No smile, no regret, just calculation. When the judge asked her why she hadn't contacted her children in over 2 months, she said, "I needed space, emotional recovery. I was burnt out." And when he asked if she believed I was capable of parenting them alone, she shrugged. "I don't know. He had brain surgery. He forgets things." That's when Brian stood. "Your Honor, we'd like to enter Exhibit 4 into the record, neurosurgeon's post-op report, stating the tumor was benign, successfully removed, and that Mr. Ramirez's cognitive functions are fully intact." The judge took his time reading it, then glanced at Teresa. "Were you aware of this prognosis before you left the marital home?" Her silence answered for her. From there, it only got worse for her. The security footage, the financial records, the testimony from Lucia, from our neighbor who saw the moving truck, from my principal who described my quick return to teaching. Teresa's story crumbled piece by piece. When she took the stand, she tried to cry. I couldn't take it anymore. He was slipping. I was alone. But the judge had already seen the timeline. Already knew she'd been transferring money before my diagnosis. Already knew she'd signed a lease on her new place a week before my surgery. Already knew about the man in the moving truck. I didn't gloat. I didn't even look at her. This wasn't about punishing Teresa. This was about restoring truth, restoring custody, restoring the life she tried to fracture while I was unconscious in a hospital bed. The judgment came swift and clear. I was granted full physical and legal custody of our children. Teresa was granted supervised visitation twice a month. She was ordered to repay half of the withdrawn funds from our joint account, plus attorney's fees. But even that wasn't the real win. The real win was watching my kids come home, knowing they were safe, knowing the court had seen the truth, that I wasn't the broken man Teresa had hoped I'd be. I was healing, and stronger than ever. 3 weeks after the custody ruling, Teresa showed up at my door. No call, no warning, just her standing on the porch with a hesitant smile and a tote bag slung over her shoulder, like this was some casual visit. "I thought maybe we could talk," she said. "Just the two of us." I didn't say anything at first, just looked at her. She glanced past me, toward the living room she no longer recognized, furniture replaced, walls repainted, new photos of the kids with me. "Daniel," she tried again, "I know I messed up, but everything happened so fast. I was scared. I didn't know how to help you." "You didn't try," I said quietly. That stopped her. She opened her mouth, closed it again, then gave a rehearsed little sigh. "I've been going to therapy. I've been doing the work. My lawyer said we might be able to revisit custody if—" I stepped outside and closed the door behind me. "You don't get to rewrite the story now," I said. "Excuse me? You abandoned your husband during brain surgery. You emptied our accounts. You lied to your children. And when you realized I wasn't dying, when you realized I wasn't going to need you, you tried to come back. That's not love, Teresa. That's opportunism." She flushed. "That's not fair. You don't understand how isolated I felt, how invisible, how—" "Don't," I said flatly. "Don't stand here and make this about your feelings. You had every chance to talk. You chose silence. You chose exit plans. You chose lies." She crossed her arms, and her tone shifted, sharpened. "Well, the kids still deserve to have both parents, and I'm their mother, Daniel. I gave up everything for this family." I raised an eyebrow. "You gave up the moment it got hard." The conversation didn't go anywhere after that. She left angry, muttering about lawyers and rights, and this isn't over. But it was. Everyone could see it, even the kids. That weekend, my daughter found an envelope in the mailbox. No stamp. Just a note from Teresa. Apologies scribbled in hurried pen, promises to do better, vague lines about how we were once so in love. She read it, looked up at me, and said, "She doesn't know who we are anymore." And she was right. We'd moved on. We had routines now. Mornings with pancakes and quiet car rides to school, afternoons at the park, late-night homework help, and movie nights on the couch. There were still hard moments, grief, questions, the ache of what used to be. But there was also peace, because love doesn't walk away when things get messy. It stays, it fights, It grows roots deeper than fear. A month after the house visit, Teresa's attorney filed a request to revisit custody. We didn't panic. We just submitted the new files, school reports showing the kids' progress, statements from their therapist, and a letter from my neurosurgeon confirming that not only had I fully recovered, but that I'd been cleared to resume full-time work and parenting without restriction. At the hearing, Teresa wore a blazer 2 sizes too big and tried again to cry on command. But this time, the judge didn't even entertain her narrative. He read the reports, paused, and said simply, "Children are not pawns in a do-over story. Custody is not a second-chance card when convenience returns. Petition denied." Just like that. No drama, no spectacle, just truth. And finality. Outside the courthouse, I stood with my son and daughter. The sun was warm, the city hummed around us. For a moment, no one spoke. Then my daughter slipped her hand into mine. "We're good now, right?" I nodded. "Yeah, we're more than good." Because we were. Not because I won in court, but because I didn't let her destroy us. Because I rebuilt what she tried to walk away from, brick by brick, with love, with patience, with truth. And that was the real victory. 6 months later, our home felt like ours again. Not the one Teresa abandoned, but the one we rebuilt. The kids laughed more, ate better, slept deeper. Our routines were steady, simple, dinner at the table, board games on Fridays, honest conversations when emotions ran high. Sometimes we still got questions. Where's Mom? Why did she leave? And I never pretended to have all the answers. But I always told the truth. She made choices that hurt us, but we're healing, together. Lucia came by every weekend. She'd bring groceries, cook too much food, and tell the kids stories about their grandparents, stories Teresa never cared to share. At school, I returned to the classroom full time. My students noticed the shift. "You smile more now, Mr. Ramirez," one of them said. I smiled even more after that. And as for Teresa, she moved out of state. I heard through the grapevine she tried to start over. Another city, another version of herself. I didn't follow, didn't stalk her social media, didn't wonder what could have been, because I knew exactly what I'd gained by letting go. See, revenge doesn't always look like fire and fury. Sometimes the sweetest revenge is peace, is waking up without anxiety in your chest, is knowing your kids are safe and your heart is whole and your life is real again. It's not about punishing the person who broke you. It's about becoming the person they never thought you could be without them. And I did. What did you think of this story? If you were in my shoes, how would you have handled it? Let me know where you're watching from in the comments. And if you believe in second chances, but only for those who earn them, vote number 3. If you believe walking away from someone at their weakest is unforgivable, vote number 9. Don't forget to subscribe to Revenge with Max so you never miss a powerful new story. Every single day,